I swore I loved him. I told everyone he was the best thing that ever happened to me, but behind his back, I called him a beta paypig. I laughed about how he paid for everything, how he worshipped the ground I walked on, how he would do anything just to keep me happy. I thought he'd never find out. But when he did, he didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just smiled. And that's when I knew I was about to lose everything. Daniel and I met through mutual friends when I was 25. He was the kind of guy who didn't stand out in a crowd, not the loudest, not the most confident, but he had a quiet charm about him. He was polite, thoughtful, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. On our first date, he showed up early, brought flowers, and planned everything down to the smallest detail. It wasn't flashy, but it was sweet, considerate, and sincere. I remember thinking, wow, he's different from the guys I usually date. And he was. Unlike my past relationships, which were filled with drama and unpredictability, Daniel was stable, reliable, and safe. At first, I loved that about him. He was the kind of guy who would drop everything to help me, whether it was picking me up when my car broke down, bringing me soup when I was sick, or surprising me with small, thoughtful gifts just to make me smile. He paid for everything. Dates, vacations. My shopping spree never let me reach for my wallet. He was financially well off and never hesitated to spend money on me. It felt like a dream. But over time, that dream started to feel suffocating. I should have appreciated him. I should have seen what I had. But instead, I started taking it all for granted. And that's where everything began to fall apart. At first, it was just harmless jokes. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Daniel had always been overly generous covering the bills, buying me gifts, even helping me with things I never asked for. If I casually mentioned needing a new bag, he'd surprise me with it the next week. If I had a bad day, he'd drop everything just to bring me my favorite snacks and flowers. I should have been grateful. Instead, I started seeing it differently. The more he gave, the less I valued it. The first time my friends made a comment about it, we were out for brunch. I was scrolling through messages from Daniel, where he was asking if I needed money for my weekend trip. Damn, he really funds your whole life, huh? One of my friends smirked. Girl, you don't have a boyfriend, you have a paypig? Another one added, laughing. I laughed, too. It was a joke, right? But after that day, I started seeing him through their eyes. Instead of a caring, devoted partner, I saw a man I had complete control over. His kindness? I mistook it for weakness. His generosity? I started expecting it. I started pushing his limits just to see how far he'd go. I complained when his gifts weren't expensive enough. I acted annoyed when he didn't offer to pay first. I started venting to my friends about how easy he was to manipulate. God, he's so whipped, I texted once. I could make him pay my rent if I wanted. You've got a beta paypig for real, my friend replied, sending laughing emojis. I laughed along, feeling powerful. Because in my mind, Daniel would never leave. He needed me more than I needed him. Or at least, that's what I thought. What I didn't realize? He was already watching, and he was about to prove me dead wrong. It happened on a random Thursday night. I was in the shower, completely unaware that my entire world was about to collapse. Daniel was in the living room, watching Netflix on my laptop. At least, that's what I thought. Until a message popped up on the screen. A message from my group chat with my friends. And the text? Lol. My beta paypig just sent me money for a girls' trip Henading. Imagine being this desperate for a woman's attention. Daniel froze. At first, he thought maybe he was misunderstanding. Maybe it wasn't about him. Maybe he was reading too much into it. But then, he scrolled up. And what he found? Destroyed him. Message after message of me mocking him behind his back. Jokes about how he paid for everything. Comments about how I didn't even really like him like that. Me laughing at how much power I had over him. All of it, right there, in black and white. By the time I stepped out of the shower, he had already read everything. I walked into the room, still drying my hair, still completely clueless. Until I saw him, sitting there, silent, staring at the screen, his jaw clenched. I felt my stomach drop. "What's wrong?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He turned the laptop towards me. "Is this what you really think of me?" His voice wasn't angry. It was calm. Too calm. I opened my mouth. My brain scrambled for an excuse. And then I did the worst thing possible. I laughed. Not because I thought it was funny, but because I was nervous. Because I thought I could downplay it. Because I thought even after all this, he wouldn't do anything. "Daniel, come on, it's just jokes." He stood up. And for the first time since I'd known him, he looked at me like I was a complete stranger. "Thanks for clearing that up for me," he said. Then he smiled. And that's when I knew I had made the biggest mistake of my life. Daniel didn't explode. He didn't yell, didn't curse, didn't even look angry. He just smiled. "Thanks for clearing that up for me," he said, closing the laptop. Then he walked away. I expected a fight, a confrontation, anything. But instead, nothing changed. At least, that's what I thought. He still paid for dinner. He still kissed me goodnight. He still acted normal. But slowly, I started noticing subtle shifts. He stopped texting first. He came home late. He stopped buying me gifts. And the scariest part? He wasn't upset. He was calm, too calm, like he was waiting for something. And I was too blind to realize he wasn't staying. He was planning his exit. One night, Daniel took me out to dinner. A fancy place. The kind where he'd normally spoil me with expensive wine and gifts. For a second, I thought, maybe he's finally over it. Then, as we finished eating, he set down his glass and looked me in the eyes. "I want to break up." I laughed. "Stop playing." But he wasn't joking. "I know everything, Alyssa," he said. "Every message, every insult, every time you called me weak." I felt ice run through my veins. And then he pulled out his phone. Pressed play. And I heard my own words, my own laughing voice mocking him, calling him my beta paypig. I wanted to sink into the floor. "I just wanted to make sure I had proof," he said, standing up. "For when I start dating again, just in case you ever try to come back." And then he left. Without a fight, without another word. He just walked away. And that's when I knew I had lost him forever. Daniel didn't just leave me. He leveled up. Fast. He hit the gym. Got in the best shape of his life. He started going out more. Traveling. Smiling. Enjoying life. And within months, he had a new girlfriend. Not just any girl, she was stunning. Confident. The kind of woman who actually respected him. Meanwhile, I was alone. No Daniel. No backup plan. Just me, my phone, and the regret eating me alive. I stalked his Instagram, watched him move on. And that's when I finally understood. Daniel wasn't weak. I was. And I had thrown away the best man I ever had. I don't get a happy ending. I don't get a second chance. All I have is the memory of what I threw away. Because the truth is, when you mock someone who loves you, when you treat their kindness as weakness, eventually, they wake up. And when they do, they don't just leave. They make sure you regret it forever. So if you're listening to this, don't take the good ones for granted. Because once they're gone, they never come back. Goodbye.